We begin the 8th letter. This letter, like many of the letters, is about charity, tzedakah. We begin with a verse. Actually, it's not a verse. It's something we say in the morning prayers, in the liturgy of the Siddur. Zoreya tzedakahs, he sows tzedakahs, which we'll explain in a second. Matzmiach yeshuos, causing deliverance to sprout forth. So the word tzedakahs is plural form of tzedakah, which we know means charity, because it means two things. It means acts of righteousness and acts of charity, and they come together. And what's interesting is that the idiom that's used over here to express it is sowing, meaning like taking a seed and putting it into the ground. So of course we need to understand what's the relationship. What does that mean? So we can understand this in light of the teachings of the sages in the Talmud that said Rabbi Elazar, he would give a coin, he would give money to the poor before prayer and then begin to pray. And as it's written, he says in Tehillim and Psalms, that through tzedek, again that word, righteousness or prayer or charity, I behold your face. In other words, through the act of righteous giving, I behold. What does it mean to behold God's face? Of course, God doesn't have face, but it means his inwardness. So why is it through charity that you would behold God's inwardness? How do we understand that? So, and when are you beholding it? By the time of prayer. So let's understand this. Prayer, every individual, based on the many layers of the heart, will each, have a divine manifestation in accordance to the many layers of a person's heart. So what does this mean? It means as follows. What we feel is one thing, but what prayer can bring to us is a gift from above. Charity, God's loving kindness, an act of God's loving kindness that he grants us, divine charity, that we can behold him. Now, what does that mean? Well, we have to understand we're in a world that is very far removed from the light of God, as opposed to the infinite light of God that radiates quantitatively and qualitatively, much more so in the higher spiritual worlds. And there, in that realm, in those worlds, angels, souls are in a state of nullification. They're really absorbed in the divine light. They're absorbed in that light. Now, how do we get it down here, that light? Remember, we're a lower world, not lower because it's less significant, lower because the divine presence is so not real, not palpable. How do we get that light here? Well, those who desire through their service of the heart to dig deeper in their heart, which means prayer. That's what prayer is. Finding that space inside of you that God will enlighten the darkness that's generally pervades in our heart. Because, in our heart we have our desires, that are self-directed. But God can illuminate that place when a person truly desires to serve through prayer. That light, the light of God, can be revealed in us, in our prayers. But we have to understand that's a kindness of God that he's doing. As kindness is metaphorically like water, right? Water flows from above down below. So likewise, God's kindness that flows from above, his divine illumination, that the higher spiritual worlds are attuned to and absorbed by, we can behold that. inner light of God. And that's what it means, God's face. Meaning, just like the face is the inwardness of the person. When you want to see what's going on inside of a person, you look at their face, right? Do you see a smile? Do you see a frown? Then you know what's going on with their soul inside. So likewise, to behold God's face, the internal aspect of godliness. God gives it to us so we can have it in a time of prayer. At a time of prayer. So, but then becomes the question, well, if it's a gift from God, right? It's God's loving kindness that he gives us this opportunity, right? That we can behold this. And others, I can behold this in a time of prayer. Of course, you got to be engaged in your prayer. But why do I need to be charitable beforehand? Why is that necessary? If it's anyways a gift. So let me be devoted in my prayers, reach deeper into my heart, that will allow my heart to be illuminated by the light of Hashem, of God. Why is it necessary that I have to give, as Rabbi Lazar says in the Talmud, he would give a coin to the poor beforehand, and then he would be able to behold the inward light of God in prayer. But if it's a gift, it's indiscriminate give and give it in prayer. Why do you have to preface it with something? So, now the Rebbe explains is because there isn't only God's indiscriminate loving kindness above that would illuminate our soul in a time of prayer of his presence, but there's also gvura, meaning divine refrain, divine holding back on the light of God, that it shouldn't be bestowed his loving kindness. So, in other words, there's an equal force above of holding back as there is giving. So in order to arouse that what should be given is the light of God and not being held back from us in the time of prayer, we have to elicit it. How? How do we elicit loving kindness? By ourselves engaging in loving kindness. Giving tzedakah, giving charity before our prayer. And that will grant us that we will get life in this world, the life of God, that will illuminate us. Now the question is, it seems to be disproportionate. Just giving a little act of charity, maybe that should give you a spiritual reward in the world to come. But in this world, that should be sufficient to illuminate my prayers. Now, of course, you got to be engaged in your prayers. It can't be that you're just mouthing some words. It needs to be that we truly focus in our prayers. But why should I get such a profound illumination of the life of God in this world, rather than do something in this world? And usually the reward is something. Reward meaning the experience will be in the world to come. But we're getting it in this world by a mere act of loving kindness, of giving charity, act of righteousness, act of tzedakah. So with this is the metaphor that we have, that you take a seed, you sow, meaning you put it into the ground, and when it's tendered to properly, what happens to that seed? It disintegrates, becomes part of the soil, arouses something much greater within than its own capacity, because it's only a simple seed, but of Mother Earth and its capacity to now blossom into a tree, fruit-bearing tree even, or to blossom into something much more. In that seed that's nothing, disintegrates. It becomes decayed in the soil, and therefore arousing the source of vegetative property in the soil that now makes from that seed into a tree that has fruit. What do we see from this? This metaphor is meant to teach us is that when we do a simple act like giving charity before our prayers. Not a huge thing. We're not talking about giving lots of money even. Coin, it said. He gave a coin, right? So you do that. That's like planting a seed. And what you get is so much more. The seed is a little nothing. It even decays, becomes disintegrated. But through that, it grows so much. So the same thing is in that charity, that it will grow so much in a time of prayer that we'll be able to have the light of God, that the angels above and spiritual beings have in the higher worlds, that they're illuminated by that. They're absorbed that light. We can have that down here too. Because we elicit that. The awakening from below through an act of loving kindness gives a loving kindness from God that is such a gift. His presence. Powerful. A lot to take out from here. First simple thing. Folks, before you pray, have a pushka in synagogue, at home. We have a charity box. And just put in a few coins before prayer. That will allow God's presence to be experienced in the prayer. Of course, you got to focus in on your prayer. We have to focus in and be engaged. But we can have that experience. A very powerful thing. And think about it. What a gift that we can have. That we can have so much more than what we put in. Because what do? Simple act of loving kindness. It's simple. Not so demanding. Not earth-shattering. But beautiful. But that act, it gives us such a beautiful return, much more than what we put in. So the important thing to also learn here is that anything that comes from above has to be an awakening from below. It may be small, but the return is great. To be illuminated by the divine is amazing. Because think of it. Look out in the world, you can see the imprint of God's wisdom in all of creation. And you can even have a sense that, God is creator. But this is much more than God is creator. This is God illuminating your soul that gives you a connection, a divine connection to Him. When you look at a beautiful, flower bed, when you look at, nature, and you can sense the harmony. So that's the beauty of nature, the wisdom in it, that there is. That's the imprint of God. But it's not the connection to God. We have that in prayer. That we only have. Animal kingdom doesn't have. Trees don't have it. And God hugs us, but not the trees. Lynn just bought pushkas for the house and to give to her children. Beautiful. And you have young children, let them have their own pushka in their own room. Every room. Miriam, when you give tzedakah, your soul becomes higher. Yes, of course, absolutely true. Yeah, your soul becomes higher. Rachel. My email is rabbi@chabadzichron.com. Okay, Rachel, is digital currency for giving charity as a payment through using a bank card the same as coins or dollars? Yeah, if it gets to, the intended place, absolutely. Before prayers, to go find somebody or an institution that needs, that might be difficult, right? So a charity box. But yes, if you make a e-transfer, the money is given, so it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be physical money that you're giving. It could be digital. I give off, and I give my credit card. I have to pay the credit card, so but it is giving, absolutely. Yes, good question. Thank you, Rachel. Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Marcy, please share with us.
This is very timely, Rabbi, because I just had a room on Clubhouse yesterday about what is the purpose of prayer. I guess I'm really struggling with this idea. I feel like I could just do the charity and skip the prayer because I don't feel like my prayers are particularly efficacious. I feel like after every time I pray, things get worse.
Things get worse. So if I can suggest the following. We need to change our perspective about prayer. In Hebrew, tefillah means to connect. In English, prayer means to request. So the non-Jewish concept of prayer is to get something. The Jewish concept of davening, of tefillah, is to become something. To become something. To become more heartfeltly connected to God, and therefore more attenuated to the emotional needs as a result, not of yours, but of others. To be more empathetic, to be more caring, empathetic, and giving will be the result. The result will not be necessarily, it could be, right? Could be, but that's not the essence of prayer, is not to receive, but to become. That's why it's called service of the heart, because our heart is very self-directed, and what we want to do is dig deeper and to be more God conscious and more God directed and more heartfelt connection to the divine. So what I would suggest is to maybe give a different perspective to it, in that respect, and know that when you're praying, when you're doing the Amidah, for example, you're standing before God, you're talking to Him, He's listening. Now, what does it mean He's listening? It means you're connecting to Him, listening and saying, oh, Ronnie is here asking again. Well, let's see, I don't know. That's not, the listening is not to elicit only something that I want. It's not excluding that, but that's not the essential nature of prayer. The essential nature of prayer is to connect. So when I'm standing before God and He's listening, meaning I'm connecting. He's hearing me. He's hearing me. I'm sensing his presence. I'm sensing his presence and my sense of connection to him. So I think that's a different way to look at prayer and a different, perspective on it that might help in feeling the great value and hence sensing the great value of prayer. I think that's the basic idea.
That is a philosophy I'm totally on board with. I mean, we were discussing in our group yesterday that prayer is a threefold combination, right? It includes praise, it includes request, and it includes thanks. And I said, if you just left out the whole request part, I wouldn't have any kind of problem with it. That feels right to me. It feels right to praise Hashem for the blessings I have. It feels right to thank Hashem for the blessings I have. But the whole request thing, every time I have tried a request of any type, like that's not a thing that's happened. There's never been any kind of movement in a positive direction. And it just feels like I could just skip the Misha Beirachs and the Shemona Esrei and all of those requesting type of prayers, because those don't have value. Those don't feel like anything is resulting from them that's positive.
So I hear you. I hear your frustration. So let me give a perspective on it. So it's interesting that the only time in prayer that we actually make a request is in the Amida, in the Shemona Esrei. Not in Hoidu, not in Baruch Shamar, not in Ashrei Yishtabach, not in, Shema. There's no request.
You can make a case for Torah service.
Huh? Sorry?
You can make a case for Torah service having requests in it.
You mean a Misha Berach?
Misha Berach, yeah. I mean, there's a whole slew of Misha Berach. Not just
yeah, but that, first of all, that's part of my point, is that till you get to the Amida, there's a lot of prayers and there's no request. So prayer, we know, is like a ladder, and you're ascending higher and higher. So you're starting off in the world of Asiya, then Yitzira, Bria, and finally the Amida is an Atzilus. Because Atzilus is a world of complete abnegation. There's no self-awareness. There's only a sense of connection. That, I mean, ideally, not that that's where I'm holding on personally. I'm just giving the concept of it. So when do you make the request? When you're totally self-abnegated of yourself, and nonetheless you're making a request. So what are you making a request? So first of all, you see the request is in plural. It's not for me. It's for us. That's right. I'm included in something greater than me. That's the request. That's first of all. Secondly, the request is not for me because that's what I, desperately need in a self-absorbed way. No, this is desperately what I need in a God-absorbed manner. And that's a very high level. Only when you've achieved, that kind of bittul, self-abnegation, that's when the request is made. And that's when the request will be much more heated, and much more heated as a result. But more of that to come. But that's just a little different perspective on this whole concept, of this whole concept. But we'll further discussion. But thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. Very good. Excellent.
I'm trying to clear my headspace coming into Rosh Hashanah.
Yes. Well, Elul. Coming to Elul, preparation. Yes. How long before we give money in our pushka to charity? What? I don't follow. How long before we give money?
Your pushka, give it to charity.
How long before, you mean you daven that you should give the charity? you know, before, whatever, anytime before. I don't think it makes a difference. It's 5 minutes before, if it's half an hour before, before your prayers. I'm not clear if that was a question. Um, Davida, let me know. Leah, would you say that Hashem doesn't answer a request? He's giving you what he sees you need, not necessarily what you think we need? Yeah, that's true, but I think the opposite. That there's a truth to that, Leah. I think there's a greater truth, and Marcy also to you too. I think when we come to the Amida, and the more we have dug into our hearts, deeper we have reached, the more that when we say Rafa'enu, heal us, the more we sense, we feel that we are healed, that we actually sense a healing, that we sense Baruch Aleinu, bless us, and we feel blessed, that we sense that we have the blessing, and that becomes then the vehicle for even more blessing. Not limiting it to that, but even more. More of that to come. All right, folks, got to get to Rambam and a bunch of other things. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you. Chabad Zech and Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you. Tanya, thank you for all your questions and input. Beautiful, amazing, as always. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.